Hello, Drunvalo.
Hello, Lilu.
It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. And you're on that beautiful island of Kauai
Yes.
and Hawaiian Islands, and I wish I was there.
Oh,
Easy to love that place.
the energy is beautiful, definitely here, and I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today as we're approaching the end of October 2011, and as I was posting on Facebook to everybody, telling them that I was re-interviewing you. Everybody gets so excited. Hundreds of messages poured in, but most of all, everybody wanted to know, how much you are loved, and it's just like a big embrace from all around the world. This was a message I had to give you.
Well, it's very sweet, and I love them too. I do, I really do, and I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, thank you. Well, we really all want to know what you're up to these days, because our last interview was in February back in Sedona, where you live, and all of us feel like we're going through so much. There's so much information pouring in. Sometimes it's hard to see the wrong, the right. What do you have to say about these times?
Well, we are in very rapid change. Everybody knows that. Everybody can feel it. If they don't know it, they can feel it because of the way that everything's unfolding so quickly. But this is an amazing time we're in, and I'm really happy that we are completing this part of the cycle right now, because once we get onto the other side of the cycle, it's going to begin to get a lot better. And it's just the nature of the cycles and the change. We're ending in one cycle, and that always means that cycle is going to end. And end, another word for it is die. It's going to end. It's literally going to go away. And that is the male dominance of the world that we've had for the last 13,000 years. And the female comes in. Thank you very much, Lilu. And begins to emit her energies and her softness and her nourishing, and I can hardly wait, really. I think we've all had enough of this war and all this pain that's been going on in the world, and it's time for something new.
When are we talking about? Does it correspond to what Kalman say, the end of the Maya calendar, which is today on the 28th of October, or what about these days?
Well, again, that is what Kellerman is saying is something you must understand that the Mayans don't necessarily agree with. I have spent a great deal of time. I've been with them since 1985, and I've spent a long time talking to them about these kinds of things. And they do not accept a lot of what we're saying. So much so that at this moment they are redoing all the knowledge, Mayan knowledge in the world themselves. They are literally looking at every glyph and every single thing and interpreting it in their own calendars and interpreting them from their knowledge and their way, and just not even looking at what the world has to say, because they've found too many discrepancies coming from so many world experts that they just won't accept it anymore. And this is the time, according to the Mayan prophecy, 2010 is when their knowledge would begin to come back, and over the next few years they're to receive all of their knowledge back that they held at the pinnacle of their life cycle, which was actually, I believe, in about the 1300s, around in there was when they were really at their height. And so it's
is the end of one cycle. When do you think that cycle is ending, and how do we know it has ended and something else has started?
Well, the cycle is based on the cycles of the Earth and the Sun and the Moon and mostly our solar system, and those cycles do not care what calendar we're using or what day we're saying, and the cycles do not end on October 28th. That is just simply not true. They end on December 21st, 2012. It is at that moment that the Earth, the Sun, and the center of the galaxy are in perfect alignment. That is the moment that the cycles begin again. And so regardless of any kind of intellectual ideas or thoughts or anything else that anybody has, that is your calendar, not some date or somebody's made something up. It is these cycles that when they're in, and the 5200 is the long count of the Mayans ends exactly on that day, and so does the precession of the equinoxes, ends exactly on that day. And there are other cycles also that are entering on that day that nobody's talking about, and even the Mayans aren't even aware of. And it's a huge moment in time. It isn't a little one. It's a huge. That does not mean that is when the cycles actually, the culmination of their prophecies takes place. In fact, according to Don Alejandro Cerrillo, they do not believe it'll happen on that day, even though that is the moment when the cycles change. There's a window of time, and that window began on October 27th or 24th, I forgot, of 2007, and it ends in late 2015, in either November or December of 2015. And so the prophecies can happen anywhere in that window. It doesn't matter where it is, and so they don't really know because they haven't got all their information back yet, but they are getting it back. I mean, I'll just tell you a little bit of history of what's going on here with the Mayans, because this is not known, and to a lot of the archaeologists and things in the world that may be listening, this is going to be a revelation on a major level. The Mayans, after the conquistadors were finished with them, there was nothing left. Almost all of their knowledge and wisdom and everything else was demolished. It came down to 3 books, or what are called a codex or a codices. And there were only 3 codices in the world. One is in Spain, I think. One is in the British Museum, I think. And one is in Germany, I think. But they're in Europe somewhere. And that's the only 3 books that the world is aware of. Now, the Itza Mayan Council, which is in the Yucatan, it's the second biggest council, and at this point, I think it's now the biggest one, because I think now that the power has shifted from Guatemala to Mexico, and that the new leader of the Mayan people is no longer Don Alejandro Cerrillo, but it is Pedro Pablo Chukpec, who is I believe he is the new leader of them. They're very quiet about these things, so it's hard to say for sure what it is. But that appears that way because when the Kogi, the Arhuacos in Colombia invited the head of the Mayan nation, that's who went down there to represent them. And that was just a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. But another member of the Itza Mayan Council is Huns Batzman, who's been a very good friend for 20-something years. And he came up here about, I don't know, maybe 10 months ago or something like that, or a year ago. I think it was somewhere in between there. And he came here to Sedona to show me another codex that the world had never seen. And he actually had 2 that they had found, and they had been exploring them and studying them for 10 years. And they had finally come to the conclusion that they were actually real. What he didn't know is that they had already been carbon dated to the 1300s approximately, and that they had been authenticated by 2 different universities, which is what's necessary to make them be real. But he didn't know that when he came to visit me. And so he sat down and he laid down a new codex. It's just called the Wincall Codex, and it's 13 pages long, and they're like an accordion, and it's all one piece. And they open it up, and it's 13 pages, and you turn it over, and there's 13 pages on the backside. It's kind of unusual, and one of the things in the Mayan culture is that the Guatemalan people, especially through Don Alejandro Cerrillo, have been stating publicly all over the world that the Mayans have never, ever been involved in crystal skulls, that this is a fantasy and just not true. But Hans Botsman wanted me to see this because this changes everything, what I'm about to tell you. He lays out this codex on this table, and then on the very first page, it shows these five, I believe it's five Mayans doing ceremony, and they're holding 5 crystal skulls. And so it's no longer, that's just not true anymore. And in there, it shows them bringing these crystal skulls through these 12 pages leading up to the last one, where it looks like it's the main temple at Chichen Itza. That's what it appears to be to me. I'm not an expert on those drawings. And then on the backside, it shows this transformation taking place as they're taking the crystals out of there, moving back. And so that's a huge thing. The world hasn't seen this yet. But then, so after he showed it to me, he went back to Mexico to it's called Lo Bay, where their main compound is, Lol Bay. And so then he comes back and he says, he calls me up a few months later and he says, we discovered these 2 codices in a museum in Los Angeles. And so he tells me, he says, I want you to just go there and see if you can get them. We would like the originals, or if we could buy them or something else like that. And the only thing he could tell me is that it's a museum in Los Angeles, you know. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I'll try my best. And I sat down on the computer, and in 15 minutes I'd nailed this place. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And I ended up talking to the curator of the museum, who remembered Hans Botsman from 10 years earlier, when he showed him those 2 things and he photographed them. And so I in my conversation with him, I asked him if we could buy these things. And he says, no, we can't. And because of the new antiquities laws, and it would mean being in court for 10 years and lots of money, and he doesn't even want to go down that road. But in his conversation, he let slip something that was huge and enormous, not only to the Mayans, but the entire world. That in their basement, they had over 1,000 codices. 1,000. And this was huge. It came from I think it's the Randolph Hearst estate when he died in the 1920s. And so all that was it's just stuck down in there. It's doing nothing for them. And so I relayed this back to the ITSA Council, and I thought they were just going to have a heart attack. And they were going, well, how do we get this? How do we get this? Mm-hmm. I don't know how we're going to get this, but I've got plans, but I don't know if they do. I'm going to try to involve the whole world, because perhaps it isn't that we buy them, and which would drag us into courts, but we only photograph them, which would take it would take a lot of money, a lot of time. We estimate about 75,000 pages of information. And so we're in the process with a huge corporation right now that wants to help us to see if we can do something along these lines. It would make this museum world famous, and it would make those documents worth. There is no amount that it.
What could be the implication for the world to see those documents and have this knowledge?
This is all the sacred knowledge that they've been waiting for, so that they can tell us exactly when things are going to happen and precisely what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And so this is important not just for them, but for us. And the Mayans are very clear about this. They understand that at this point they belong to the world. And all of their ceremonies and everything that they're doing from now until this is over with, they've told me, and they're also telling this corporation I'm working with, that they're going to allow everything to be filmed. They're going to let the world see everything they're doing and try to explain to the world what they're doing and why, and not try to be secretive or hide anything, because this has world implications on every level. And then, if that isn't enough, after I leave that, I go out. About 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from someone I've never seen before. I don't know who they are. I do now, but I didn't know then. And this gentleman says to me, he's a treasure hunter, and they have these giant boats that go down and grab things out of the ocean and make money, this kind of stuff. And in there looking for treasures, they discovered 7 more codices.
Wow. 7.
and he says we discovered these, and he says, but I don't know how to get them back to the Mayans. Could you help me? And I said, well, that's not a problem. I know exactly how to get them back to the Mayans. And he says, well, so he says, what do I do? And he says, well, the first thing is photograph them all, because that's what we really need, is the photographs. And they don't need the actual thing; they need the images. And so he said, so he photographed them all professionally, and sent them to me on CDs. And I sent these to the It's a Mayan Council, and they just said thank you very much, but they wanted to check, and they did all this checking and everything else to see if they were real. And came to the conclusion they were. And then they came back and said, Drunvalo, this is the central piece of information that we needed. This is how we go fourth dimensional, exactly how we do it. Wow. And which not only do we need to know, but so does the world. And so they were just so excited about this. It was incredible. And so now we're looking at buying those $7 or $6.5 million. And so you can imagine what 1,000 of them or more would be. Mm. But so the prophecy is actually happening, as they said. They said that it would begin in 2010. That's when it started all unfolding, and it's still rapidly moving forward, and their knowledge is being returned to them right now. Now what they're doing is they are bringing the crystal skulls across the United States. They started on this... what is today? The 28th? They started yesterday in New York. And according to them, they have to do ceremony across very specific places across the United States, ending in Los Angeles. We think, well, why would they be coming to the United States? But it is Manhattan Island used to be theirs. You know, I mean, a lot of this stuff, there was no lines a long time ago, and all North America was really one thing. And so they're doing ceremony yesterday in New York City, and on Manhattan Island, and then they are moving right now. I forgot where it is, but they're going across the United States doing ceremony all these places. Finally, coming here to Sedona on the 7th of November. Mm-hmm. And where they're going to do ceremony and also talk to the whole world about what's going on in this, explain these things about calendars that we're just kind of talking about. This will be Huns Bassman doing this. And then they're going into to Los Angeles, to LAX, to a huge expo, which is based just on them. And the 13 elders from the It's a Mayan Council, we're flying them into there, where they're going to do ceremony right on stage with airplanes going over the top of them and millions of people all around, 10,000 people watching. And this is what they say they have to do now. They can't hide anymore. They have to express all this. Mm. So
well, it's powerful that they're coming out too. Is there some discord within the Mayans? Like the OPs, where some would say something and the other ones would say another, or the Mayans are really
well, there's discord between every single indigenous tribe I'm aware of on Earth. They all are not in complete agreement with each other. The elders are not completely in agreement on almost everywhere. The Hopi, of course, that's tremendous discord between them and the different mesas. There's 3 mesas, and they don't agree at all right now. That was part of their prophecy. They said that they would come down to where there'd just be 1, 2, or 3 elders that actually knew what was going on, and everybody else would be in confusion. And with the Mayans, it's not so bad, really. There are about 10 or 12 different councils. I mean, they're in Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and moving all over the places where their actual ruins are found. So so it's a big area, and it's developed over a long time. The Itza Council and the Guatemalan Council are not in agreement on they're in agreement on a lot of things, but when it comes to very specific things, they're not in agreement. But the Itza Council now, this is where the attention is going because of what's about to happen. The ceremonies that are about to focus on are focusing on Chichen Itza, which is the heart center of the Mayan culture. and it is there that they need to do this special ceremony. Believe it or not, the Mexican government has not allowed the Mexican the Itza Mayan Council, the Mexican Mayans, to do ceremony on December 21st, 2012. They won't allow them.
Oh.
And they were going to do it in every single one of their things, but they have to do it in one. And there's actually three. There's Chichen Itza. There's another one which I don't want to name it because it's so secretive. And then there's a third one which was Tikal in Guatemala. In order to fulfill their ceremony, their prophecy, they have to do it in one of those three places. And I love them too. I do. I really do. And I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, thank you. Well, we really all want to know what you're up to these days, because our last interview was in February back in Sedona, where you live, and all of us feel like we're going through so much. There's so much information pouring in. Sometimes it's hard to see the wrong, the right. What do you have to say about these times?
Well, we are in very rapid change.
This conversation with you today as we're approaching the end of October 2011, and as I was posting on Facebook to everybody, telling them that I was re-interviewing you, everybody gets so excited, hundreds of messages poured in, but most of all, everybody wanted to know, how much you are loved. And it's just like a big embrace from all around the world. This was a message I had to give you.
Well, it's very sweet. End, another word for it is die. It's going to end. It's literally going to go away. And that is the male dominance of the world that we've had for the last 13,000 years. And the female comes in. Thank you very much, Lilu. And begins to emit her energies and her softness and her nourishing, and I can hardly wait, really. Everybody knows that. Everybody can feel it. If they don't know it, they can feel it because of the way that everything's unfolding so quickly. But this is an amazing time we're in, and I'm really happy that we are completing this part of the cycle right now, because once we get onto the other side of the cycle, it's going to begin to get a lot better. And it's just the nature of the cycles and the change. We're ending in one cycle, and that always means that cycle is going to.
Hello, Drunvalo.
Hello, Lilu.
It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. And you're on that beautiful island of Kauai. Yes. And Hawaiian Islands, and I wish I was there.
Oh, the energy is beautiful, definitely here. And I'm so thrilled to have